He fought for me to do it after becoming intrigued. Paul and I finally met after the studio made every effort to keep me out of the movie. We met at his New York apartment, and this has a lot to do with Paul as a person and the reason he and I sit calmly in the last light of his later years, Robert Redford. No stage directions, no scripts, no cameras. A man looking back at a life beyond the movie screen. We all recall the warm, familiar honesty in his voice. Though a little slower now, his words still have the same poignant sincerity that kept audiences listening to every word. Redford once smiled softly but confidently when asked what he had learned from Paul Newman. "He is a really generous and honest man." I was struck by those two things. It went beyond a simple homage. It was a declaration of brotherhood, respect, and appreciation. Newman was more than just a co-star to Redford. When no one else was willing to support him, he was the one. Redford remembered that the studio didn't want me while we worked on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I wasn't famous enough, they said, but Paul said, "Let's go with this guy." I wouldn't have been in the movie at that point if it weren't for him. Silent, significant, and transformative for both. While the other star was just beginning to rise, the first one was brilliant. Together, they became legends rather than merely actors. They recognized something genuine in one another that went beyond celebrity, not because Hollywood made that decision. We go over that story again today. Through decades of respect, silliness, and fun, a trust was established on a dusty movie set. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid aren't the only ones involved. It is the tale of two guys who, despite the studio's refusal, became brothers in silence. Hollywood relied heavily on names, faces, and box office power in 1968. All three were in Newman's possession. He was the man of the hour already. Golden reputation, charisma with blue eyes. Well, I wouldn't have been in the movie if it weren't for Paul. It simply would not have occurred. For a man to take that kind of risk was extremely kind. They changed the title after he was in. He will eventually portray Butch Cassidy from the Sundance Kid series, a man with the power to produce or ruin a movie. Then Redford came along, talented and captivating, yet still an outsider. The studio had one stipulation when Butch Cassidy started filming: there were no unknowns. They hesitated to take the chance of Redford, who had just finished a few minor pictures. Later on, he would speak candidly about that traumatic phase. "I wasn't as famous as he was, therefore the studio didn't want me. Paul was already well known, and I had just recently worked on a few movies." Then history was altered by three men. Paul Newman, whom Redford had never met, writer William Goldman, and director George Roy Hill. Hill saw possibilities. His vigor pleased Goldman. However, Newman made the decision that turned everything upside down. The young actor caught his eye, and he said, "Let's go with this guy." It was more than just casting. It was a faith vote. The gesture of a veteran stating, "I see you." The result was a bond, a connection that would endure for decades. Redford subsequently said, "I wouldn't have been in that movie if it weren't for Paul. It simply would not have occurred." That one choice created one of the most illustrious collaborations in film history, defied the studio, and changed the course of casting history. But it ignited something deeper than the movies, a silent confidence between two men who understood one another without the need of words. Nobody realized that the devotion that started in those casting sessions would outlive not only fame and wealth, but also life itself, as the cameras rolled and the world fell in love with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. When Butch first met Sundance, they were known as outlaws. When they initially met, they were merely two actors. One is already well known, and the other is a modest talent who is establishing himself. At the height of his career, Paul Newman exuded effortless assurance, arriving with humility, and that serene focus that would come to define him was Robert Redford. There were no bright lights when they met. Rather, it was via talks, inquiry, and intuition that it clicked in quiet places. "I didn't know Paul," Redford once remarked. "He was someone I had never met. Hubble, your girl is beautiful. When you visit, how about taking her out for a drink? I am unable to." The new guy was me. He didn't treat me that way, despite the risk. He was like a companion to me. Something ignited from that initial interaction. Every scenario was illuminated by playful sparks that were devoid of tension, and E.G. Newman was naturally funny. Redford had a natural sense of timing, and they were in sync rather than merely acting. George Roy Hill, the director, saw right away. Later, he claimed that the entire atmosphere changed when Redford and Newman entered a set. It wasn't acting, he demanded. On the surface, it was chemistry, but on the inside, it was deeper comprehension. Redford's quiet disobedience and refusal to follow Hollywood's rules were what Newman recognized in him. Redford recognized in Newman a man who made generosity seem natural and who carried his reputation lightly. In a subsequent interview, Redford recalled those early days with a smile. "After we began conversing and joking, it became effortless for us to collaborate. Making a movie didn't feel like it. It was like building a larger thing." The bond between Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid grew indisputable as they developed. Because it was alive, every line, every smirk, and every gaze felt real. It was more than just a show. It was a film on trust. On that day, Butch and Sundance became friends rather than rivals. They were also starting a collaboration that would outlast all of their future movies, even though neither of them realized it. Redford saw the Sundance Kid's criminal persona as more than just a part. It was intimate, almost religious. Redford saw a reflection of himself, a quiet rebel, a dreamer who never quite fit into Hollywood's norms, while others saw a charming outlaw. They wanted him to play Butch Cassidy because of a Broadway comedy, he remembered, but he told George Roy Hill, "I'm not interested in that character. The other guy, the Sundance Kid, is the one with whom I identify." To discuss it, they got together in a tavern on 3rd Avenue, a script that would soon make movie history: 2 men and 2 drinks. It was Redford who recalled, "I think I've always had a slide outlaw sensibility. I am that person. I identify better with that character." Everything changed after that one discussion. Redford's candor captivated Hill, who started to view the story in a new light. The Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy was also the original title of the script before the studio changed it once Newman was cast as the lead. However, the order of the names was irrelevant. It was the connection that was growing between them. Redford and Newman saw the spirit of an outlaw in one another. In different ways, both were rebels. Newman, the movie star, who hated the flimsy side of fame. Redford, the reserved outsider who desired for art to have a genuine meaning on television. It's electric energy. While Newman's Butch exuded warmth and confidence, Redford played Sundance with calm force, charm, and cool restraint. They made something unique together. 2 men who share the spotlight completely rather than vie for it. According to Redford's later perspective, "I think I was born with a little rebellion in me." Paul understood that. He made no attempt to alter it. He left it alone. Their secret weapon was that knowledge. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were 2 men who knew enough about life to know that being an outlaw wasn't about breaking the law to recognize each other behind every smirk and glance. It was about remaining loyal to who you are. Then there was giggling, never-ending trickery, jokes, and trust. The hilarity that took place behind the cold stares and gunfights was what really united Redford and Newman, despite all the talk of chemistry and skill. Pranks, light-hearted competitiveness, and unending fun were the foundation of their friendship. Redford chuckled as he recalled it. Paul enjoyed playing pranks on others. A tiny boy in a man's body, with a heart for pulling practical jokes. Newman's sense of humor was legendary on sight. In the middle of the scene, he switched Redford's bike seat, almost knocking him down. He also unscrewed Redford's chair in a stealthy manner. The chair collapsed as Redford sat down right before an interview. The entire team burst out laughing. Redford retaliates in a sophisticated, astute, and unrelenting manner. Confetti inexplicably filled Newman's automobile. Raw onions took the place of his lunch, and his shoes were plastered to the trailer floor. It turned into a game of love rather than rivalry. With every joke, "I recognize you. I have faith in you." Later, Redford claimed that as long as the joke was humorous, he didn't mind being the target of it. He understood that humor kept everyone human. Between commitment and humor, their relationship flourished. They were not strangers because of their fame. They didn't leave the ground. Redford respected how Newman never took himself too seriously and struck a balance between modesty and accomplishment. Redford recalled that he had this great mischief. When things weren't going well, he could still make you chuckle. Everyone adored him because of this. "We should not take life too seriously," he told us. Their performances were infused with that sense of comedy. Audiences felt as though they had known each other for years because of the teasing, the lighthearted banter, and the glances that were exchanged. It wasn't a performance. It was authentic. And that laughing followed them for decades after the cameras stopped rolling. Milestones in their families, new endeavors, and even when time slowed them both down. These were instances for Redford that had nothing to do with movies or celebrity. They were about friendship based on unwavering trust, trickery, and laughter. 4 years after Redford and Newman's reunion with Butch Cassidy, The Sting debuted in theaters in 1973, and the world was enamored. There was something much more sincere, a bond of total trust beneath all the slick con artists and blinding confidence. Both were icons by that time. The blue-eyed superstar with a burgeoning renown and a run of hits is Newman. Redford is a rising star in Hollywood, charming, cautious, and subtly aspirational. On the set, however, there was only two artisans in perfect rhythm, no ego or competitiveness. It felt similar to putting on an old glove. "Everything just fit," Redford stated of their reunion. "There was no need for us to speak. We simply anticipated each other's actions." In a field where looks are crucial, trust like that was rare, and they had it in spades. Paul Newman, however, did. Humorous in the most kind way, honest and grounded. Newman's signature smile and sardonic humor would break the tension during the Sting's filming. He would mutter to Redford, "You think the audience will notice we're making this up?" After a difficult sequence went on for hours, with a sly smile, Redford would respond, "Only if you keep talking." The crew adored it. Like a song they both knew by heart, they exuded energy with ease. The Sting became more than just a movie because of its spark. It turned into a masterpiece. A tale of camaraderie masquerading as a scam. Later, Redford thought, "The tale wasn't the only thing that succeeded, it was us." Acting never seemed like a competition to Paul. According to Redford, he viewed it as cooperation. Their friendship was strengthened by that uncommon off-screen interaction. They would discuss art, family, and the ridiculousness of celebrity. They both respected each other's lives, treasured privacy, and lived far from the bustle of Hollywood. The Sting became into more than just a film. It grew to represent trust, humor, and respect. Two individuals who were more than just actors. They had faith in one another. As he grew older, Redford mentioned Newman's name with a kind of silent awe. His tone shifted, and the brightness in his eyes subsided, sounding more like a brother than a co-star. Redford leaned back in one interview, his voice quiet and earnest. In this line of work, friendships like that are rare. When the cameras stop rolling, the majority fade. Ours didn't. In Hollywood, where appearances and short-lived partnerships are paramount, ours lasted. They remained united by sincere love and devotion. Their friendship endured through decades, despite grief, aging, and celebrity. It was never theatrical or noisy. They didn't have to pose for every picture or attend every function. Rather, they checked in quietly, sent subtle notes, and played practical jokes from all over the nation. Redford was among the first to support Newman's company when he created it. Newman encouraged Redford as he founded Sundance. Respect, no pride, no envy. Paul was one of the few people I could rely on to tell me the truth, Redford once remarked. The true reality, not the Hollywood version. Redford took his time making public remarks and paying respects to Newman after his death in 2008. Rather, he retreated, introspective and solitary, allowing his sorrow to be expressed via silence. "There's a void now," he murmured softly when he eventually spoke. "I can't fathom living without him." Those remarks, silent but impactful, held decades of mutual trust, labor, and laughter. Redford was aware that their story was more than just the tale of two historic actors. It told the story of two guys who met at the appropriate moment and remained together throughout their lives. He acknowledged, years after that, he occasionally thought Paul would have adored this when working on the set or taking in a Utah sunset. Because their friendship was based on something genuine in a world that rarely is, it endured beyond fame or movies. Softly, Redford continued, "He was my friend. The finest thing I can say about anyone is that the core of their story is contained in those words. A friendship that stood the test of time, two men, and two legacies." Redford didn't talk about Newman like a celebrity in the end. He referred to him as family. "He was my friend," he said softly again. Their bond outlasted fame, awards, and even time. Redford experienced the quiet of a world without its most brilliant laughter after Newman's death. But he never wept in public. Rather, he paid tribute to his friend in the best way he knew how, by recalling their shared grace, humor, and lessons. One bond that shaped a generation, two men, and two legacies. We appreciate your presence on the Hollywood Yesterday channel. Make sure to click the subscribe button and enable notifications if you enjoy learning about the little-known backstories of celebrities. We bring you closer to the friendships, the moments that permanently defined Hollywood, and the legends